colleagues and members of the Department of Treasury. It has gone 9 o'clock, and I would like us to start our meeting of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts for purposes of meeting with the Department of the Treasury as a consequence of the annual report resolution that was taken last year. If I may, before we may start, can I just allow the members of the committee who are present to indicate their presence?
Good morning, Chair. It's Derek America, a member of the committee.
Thanks very much, Honorable America.
Good morning, Chair Matlodi Maseko, member of the committee.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko.
Good morning, Chair. Christopher Fry, alternate member of this committee.
Thank you very much, Honorable Fry.
Good morning, Chair. Member Kasim is present as well.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kasim. I think then with that, Honorable Member, I see there's another hand that has been raised, or it went down.
Morning, Chair. My name is Member Nomi Nkondlo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkondlo. Mr. David, can we get an indication, were there any apologies maybe?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honourable members and officials present. Chair, there was just one apology, Chair, from Honourable Member Seleko, and Honourable Fry is standing in for Honourable Seleko, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. Then with that, then, honourable members, I would like us to start then our meeting. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to give the Treasury. Can I get an indication, Mr. David, is all the Treasury delegation in?
Chairperson, the entire delegation is in, Chair, led by the HOD, Mr. Dave Savage, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davids. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to the HOD so that if they've got a presentation, they can make the presentation and take us through the presentation. Then as and when some members of the department are going to speak, they can then introduce themselves as to who they are. So I'm going to hand over to the HOD.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and good morning to members of the committee, and thank you for the invitation to brief the committee on the two matters for today. We'll deal with them both in turn in terms of the agenda, and I think with your permission, Chairperson, I understand we'll just pause after each item to allow for questions and further questions and discussion for the committee. If I may then go straight to the first item, which is on the underspending that the department experienced in the 21-22 financial year and its impact on the achievement of predetermined objectives. I will ask the CFO to take us through the presentation, but just by way of introduction for members, the department did in that financial year experience an underspending of 5.7% of the final appropriation. The drivers, as you will see in the presentation, were really twofold. The first was a series of exogenous factors, which accounted for about half of that underspending of 17.6 million. Those exogenous factors were really global supply chain disruptions, difficulties in getting hold of laptops and so forth in the COVID period. They were the bursaries being declined, late claims being submitted by service providers, us, from a policy perspective, not transferring the financial recovery services grant to vulnerable municipalities, and some efficiency gains that we could make on, particularly on training, where the training was still undertaken but at no cost. But there were still procurement delays that were endogenous, were an area that we have struggled with. They didn't have the underspending did not have a significant effect on the achievement of our predetermined objectives, because I think it's important to note that the department is predominantly, it is a compensation spending heavy department. In other words, our people are at the core of what we do. And so while the delays did, were unfortunate and undesirable, the staff did pick up the slack to make sure that we could deliver on critical programs and projects during the year. I think I should add, just by final way of introduction, that it's obviously an undesirable situation, and at a management level we have taken measures to address it. I think when we looked at the closeout that we've just looked at, our provisional numbers for the 22-23 financial year, which closed at the end of last week, we have seen a significant positive result from those interventions that we made from a management perspective, and we'll give a sneak preview of that. So I will hand over to the CFO, Ms. Anna-Marie Smith, to just take us through the detail of the presentation on the matter as requested by the committee. Over to you, Anna-Marie.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Good morning, members, as well as my colleagues. So I'm just going to take you through the presentation. So the first slide deals with I'm just giving you a snapshot of the financial situation, and then as well as the performance information for the 21-22 financial year. So you will see that the financial versus the non-financial performance on the first table, program 1 achieved 88% of its targets. So you will just see in the block below, they achieved 7 out of the 8 targets fully and 1 partially achieved. So that was 88% of the targets. The program spent 92% of its budget. Then going on to program 2, sustainable resource management, they have achieved 88% of their targets. So out of the 26 targets, 23 were achieved, with 3 partially achieved. You will also see that partially achieved means between 50 and 99%. Going on to program 3. Program 3 is asset management. They achieved 92% of their targets. So out of the 13 targets, they achieved 12, with 1 partially achieved, with a budget spend of 96%. Then on program 4, achieved 88% of the targets. Out of the 13 targets, 11 achieved and 2 partially achieved, and that related to 97% of the budget spent. And then in total, the Provincial Treasury achieved 88% of their targets. Out of the 60, 53, with 7 partially achieved, and 95% of the budget was spent. If you go to the next few slides, I'll go into the detail per program. I'm just giving you an indication of what targets were not fully achieved, and then also what was the reasons for the underspending. So on program 1, as indicated, only 1 target not fully achieved, and that was the percentage of procured communication services implemented. And then obviously the reason for not achieving or partially achieving that target was we needed to prioritize the budget in favor of COVID-19 initiative, and that was about 75,000 Rand. On the underspending underspending side, and I think the HOD has alluded to that, there was the delay in the procurement of the laptops, and that was 2 million. And then on the external bursary program, I think the HOD also mentioned that is 1.697 million, and that is because the students that was awarded the bursaries declined their bursaries. And then the last reason for the underspending was the non-receipt of the interdepartmental claim from the Department of the Premier for the business process re-engineering project, and that amounted to 666,000. Going to the next page, it just gives you the detail on program 2. So the targets not fully achieved was the integrated municipal budget policy assessment reports, and the reason for that was that the CKD municipality did not table the approved budget after the start of the financial year. And the second one was also with regards to the IYM assessment, and that was also because the CKD municipality failed to submit the IYM reports for the M3 and M4 and submitted a Schedule G application requesting extension. So you will see they have, as I've indicated, 88% targets achieved with 93 underspending, and the underspending was mainly related to the earmarked funding for municipal interventions. I think they also, they actually alluded to that, is the financial management recovery grant could not be allocated and transferred timeously because the recovery plan was only instituted on the 7th of March, and that resulted in a 1.9 million underspending. Consultancy services budget allocated for training to municipalities was also a reason for the underspending, and that was because due to COVID-19, all training that could not take place as planned. On the fiscal futures project, procurement delays, and that resulted in the 500,000 rand underspending. Also on training, a 317,000 rand underspending, but as the HOD indicated that the staff went on MMC training, and the Department of Local Government paid for that training, and then also 3 free courses provided by the National School of Government, as well as our PTI, Provincial Training Institute, and then also the training on the expenditure reviews was part of the expenditure review project, and that was paid under consultancy services. Then also on the annual subscription for the financial sustainability rating, the procurement was finalized in the 2023 financial year. It could not be finalized in the 21-22 financial year. Expenditure development for the infrastructure, the procurement of appointment of pool of suitable qualified professional experts were delayed, and that resulted in a 300,000 rand underspending. And there was also a delay in the 20th and the 21st Amendment Bill, about 72,000 rand, and then also the printing of the MERO, because the projected expenditure was less than the projected expenditure was more than the actual expenditure on the printing of the MERO. Then going on to program 3, the targets not fully achieved was the commodity procurement strategies developed. The intervention was has an external focus, and they were dependent on the external stakeholders cooperation. And then just on the under expenditure, the reasons for that, there was a contract for 2 resources for the provision of functional, technical and management support to the parcel system commenced later than anticipated, and at the end of the day only 1 resource was allocated and not 2 resources as originally anticipated, and that resulted in a 1.1 million underspending, as well as then the ITSM project, and there was an underspending of 667. And we then on the asset management project, that was for the training and development and the review and improvement of the formulation of an asset management system governance for 6 municipalities. The project commenced a little bit later than anticipated, and it will run over 2 financial years. So that was an underspending of nearly 600,000 rand. And then also on the training and development, as indicated, there was also some 3 training that the staff attended, and then also they did a data analytics course by the National School of Government, 118,000 rand. Going on to program 3, financial governance, also the last program is the targets not achieved is data strings reconciled to audited AFS, and there were a number of municipalities, Beaufort West, Kannaland and Laingsburg, that their audits was only finalized in the middle of March 2022, and they could not submit the audit strings. And then the individuals that have successfully completed their SIGA training, due to the ill health of one of the trainees, the contract was extended, and therefore not all of them successfully completed the program. Going on to then the underspending. The underspending was regards to the public entity review project, and there was delays in the appointment of the service provider, and that's 1.2 million, and then also support to the Kannaland on risk management and the internal audit projects. The expenditure as one of the second panel of experts resulted in to be non-compliant, so there was a number of bidding processes, and then there was a delay in the finalization of the procurement, and that's the internal audit was 200,000 rand, and then the risk management was 150,000 rand. As indicated, also can go to the next slide, Nadia. As indicated by the HOD, the underspending, as much as the underspending was a big concern for us, and as you will maybe be aware, Treasury has had a history of underspending, and in the current financial year, we really emphasize the spending, the planning of the expenditure. So and obviously we did an analysis of what was the root causes. As the HOD said, some was not within our control, but those that were within our control, we indicated that obviously there was. The managers have a quality commitment. For example, we don't want to waste, and we don't want to just spend for the sake of spending. And obviously, we also, as I've mentioned, there was a number of late procurement or delayed procurement. So poor planning was one of the reasons that we identified for the underspending, and inadequate and fragmented capacity, not only on the number, but I think also on the maybe the training and awareness on procurement. So those were the underlying issues that was identified. What we did is we clarified accountabilities, and then we also utilize the procurement planning tool, the monitoring of the progress on the procurement plan, as well as the reporting thereof at the different levels of the management meetings. We also enhanced transfer payments, the whole process with regards to transfer payments, consequence management, and then also tightening the predetermined objectives design and reporting, and also tightening up on spending performance. As the HOD also indicated, just to give you a little glimpse on the expenditure as at preliminary expenditure as at the 31st of March 2023. So you will see in total we are now it seems like we will only have a 0.5% under expenditure at the end of the financial year. Obviously, that could change a little bit. Maybe there's a journal that still needs to go through, but this will be more or less the situation that we will report in our annual report and financial statements for the 22-23 financial year. So you will see that's a huge improvement from where we were at the end of the 21-22 financial year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. So that concludes our input on the first item on the agenda.
Thank you, HOD. I think let us actually deal with the next then if there's one, so that we can just, when you ask question, we can ask question on everything.
Absolutely, Chairperson, no problem. So the next item on the agenda is a briefing to the committee on the process that the Treasury, and now this is the Treasury rather than the department, if you can make that slight distinction, deals with the condonation of irregular expenditure. This has been a long-standing issue across government, and provincial treasuries in the more recent past have been given a greater role to play in the condonation process, and so we've stepped up to the plate in that regard and have introduced a robust process for condonation of irregular expenditures. It is, of course, very important to understand what constitutes irregular expenditure. It's often, I think, misunderstood as to what irregularity means. And so we'll deal with a little bit of the issues of the definitions, the regulatory environment, the various roles and responsibilities of different parties in the condonation process, the approach that we take both institutionally and in terms of the principles and requirements for condonation, and give a little bit of a summary of the progress that we've made, good progress that we've made in this regard within the framework that we have, and some areas that we're working on the way forward. And so in order to give that presentation, I will hand over to Ms. Gantana and Ms. Adila Abu to take us through the presentation. Over to you, Jalinda.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. I think the HOD's introduction to the presentation, it covered it sufficiently. So without further delays in the process, I'm just going to hand over to Ms. Adila Abu. She is currently the Acting Chief Director, Provincial Government Accounting. Over to you, Adila.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members. With regards to the presentation today, I'm going to take you, as the HOD indicated, I'm going to take you through the process on how we deal with irregular expenditures, including our condonation process. And like the HOD mentioned, it is important to just touch on the definition of irregular expenditure. And you would see irregular expenditure is expenditure other than unauthorized that has been incurred in contravention of, or that is not in accordance with the requirement of any legislation. So if it's in contravention of a legislation, then it is considered irregular. It could be the PFMA, the State Tender Board Act, or any regulations in terms of that act, or any provincial legislation providing for procurement in the specific provincial government. So in terms of the guidance that has come through from National Treasury issued NTI 2 of 2019 and a related internal irregular expenditure framework. And this was done on the 16th of May 2019 to further regulate irregular expenditure for institutions that are subject to the PFMA. Now, when we received this instruction tool, we sent it to legal for an opinion on the legislative mandate to get clarity on the legislative mandate of the MEC of Finance to condone. And this was done in July 2019. And from there, we also had a workshop with the departments in the province on the irregular expenditure framework, and we had the workshop in August. In December, we received a revised legal opinion on the mandate of the MEC to condone, and there was also a delegation of authority in terms of who can condone on behalf of the MEC, and this was done in August as well, 2020. We then issued a circular number 27 of 2022 to the accounting officers and accounting authorities in August 2020. And part of our PT process, which I'm going to expand on in the later slides, is we have a condonation working committee that works, that reviews the requests for condonation. That committee is bound by terms of reference. We've also issued a transversal SOP across the province to ensure that irregular expenditure is dealt with consistently with the principles in the framework as well as NTI2. And then we've also given a process map to supplement that SOP and a guidance on how the disclosure note should look like, as well as we keep a condonation request register to monitor the cases that come through to us. Now, subsequent to that, in the recent months, NTI 4 of 2020 to 23 and PFMA compliance and reporting framework was issued again by National Treasury on the 23rd of December 2022 to regulate even further the irregular expenditure within provinces. But I will touch on what the new NTI mentions. In terms of the duties and responsibilities of the accounting officers and the accounting authorities, we look at the PFMA, specifically Section 38 and 51, which defines the general responsibilities of the accounting officer and authority. And in this, it includes the requirement to take effective and appropriate steps to prevent irregular expenditure. So if an AO or an accounting authority is made aware of an alleged irregular expenditure in terms of the Treasury Instruction 2019 and the framework, they specifically say that the AO and the accounting authority must do the following. They have to perform an assessment test or what is called a determination test to look at what are the facts and collect all the information possible on what caused the transgression, as well as who is responsible or whether a financial loss was or will be suffered by the respective department or entity. Now, if they consider that there's fraud, corruption, or other criminal conduct is suspected, then the Institute needs to lodge a formal investigation by referring the matter to the Provincial Forensic Services. And then if fraud, corruption, or criminal conduct is then confirmed, they further need to take action. For example, they need to refer it to SAPS and recover any financial losses from an external party or the responsible official where applicable. They also need to take disciplinary steps against the responsible official or officials, and part of that could include a financial misconduct investigation, and they need to address the control environment in order to prevent the reoccurrence of this irregular expenditure. So the process that was implemented within the Western Cape government to deal with irregular expenditure, we have asked departments to and public entities to conduct a pre-checking of orders, and this is to proactively detect and prevent irregular expenditure in process where practical. All departments conduct post-order testing on payment batches, so they review payments that have happened already to detect irregular expenditure in process and to address the governance requirements in line with the irregular expenditure framework. Like I mentioned earlier, the transversal SOP that was issued by the Provincial Treasury is to assist departments and public entities to be consistent in managing the irregular expenditure. Within the Provincial Treasury, the Directorate Provincial Government Supply Chain Management introduced an SCM policy commentary process and associated engagements and communications where departments and public entities can proactively prevent irregular expenditure. The Directorate PG Accounting within PT also assists departments and public entities with the assessment of irregular expenditure, and we provide guidance and advice on the interpretation of the related legislation. From time to time, the PGAC Directorate also rolls out training initiatives to the departments and public entities on the assessment and determination tests that need to happen for potentially irregular expenditure. Within that directorate, we've also reintroduced the Provincial Internal Control Forum, which is for the entire province, the departments and entities. And that platform is where departments and entities can share information and best practices. During 2022, we also had our Provincial Internal Audit Unit, which sits within the Department of the Premier, to conduct a transversal audit on the implementation of the irregular expenditure framework and to assist Western Cape government's departments in bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of governance, risk management, and the control processes in the implementation of the framework. So we've put many steps in place to ensure that we are covered from a governance perspective. And then in terms of institutionalizing the condonation of irregular expenditure within the PT, the delegations that came through from the legal opinion, what we have done is the delegation for amounts up to 10 million sits with the DDG of Governance and Asset Management to condone irregular expenditure, and it sits for amounts above 10 million sits with our head official to condone irregular expenditure of that value. Now, in terms of Treasury Circular 27 of 2022 that we issued, PT has advised accounting officers and authorities on the interpretation and implementation of the framework. Like I mentioned, we did issue a process flow on how the submission should work for requests for condonation in terms of irregular expenditure, and this comes through to the Provincial Accountant General's office. And then what must be in that pack or in that submission when it is sent through to the PAG is that the AO needs to confirm that a determination test was conducted. He also needs to include the findings and recommendations of the specific unit of function that conducted the determination test. The AO and/or accounting authority also needs to confirm that an investigation was conducted in cases of identified fraudulent, corrupt, or other criminal conduct. If they confirm that there is alleged fraudulent, corrupt, or other criminal conduct, the AO or accounting authority must show confirmation that a criminal charge has been laid in the case. And then all the findings and recommendations of the functionary that conducted the investigation needs to be included in the pack submitted for condonation. And the AO or the accounting authority needs to also confirm that losses were not incurred and that value for money was achieved in the case of the irregular expenditure incurred. Further to that, the accounting officer or accounting authority must confirm that disciplinary action was taken against the responsible employee and confirm that remedial action was further taken or is going to be taken to prevent the recurrence of the irregular expenditure in similar circumstances. Now, I touched on the fact that there is a terms of reference for the condonation working committee. We've established this committee to assist the head official in discharging his responsibility in terms of the NTIs. The purpose of the committee is to consider all requests that come from the respective departments and entities and provide clarity and guidance to the delegated officials that are entrusted with the responsibility to condone or not condone irregular expenditure, as well as provide reasons or recommendations to the respective AOs or accounting authorities when irregular expenditure is not condoned. I will touch on what can be done when it's not condoned. The CWC is chaired by the Provincial Accountant General, and its members consist of 5 members across the different functional areas in PT. And then the PG Accounting Directorate within the Office of the PAG is responsible for the secretariat function. When we receive the request to condone, the Directorate PG Accounting and Compliance Unit, which is the Secretariat, the first step we take is to update the online condonation register once we receive the requests. We do a preliminary review and compliance checks conducted against the NT prescribed criteria. We also check the details of compliant requests taken up in a presentation, and we put it together per case that's submitted per department or public entity, and we share the required supporting documentation of these cases to the CWC committee in the meetings. Non-compliant requests are followed up by the Secretariat to address shortcomings and or further information that might be requested from the accounting officers and accounting authorities. And the Secretariat issues an internal control compliance report if necessary to highlight concerns and recommend corrective actions when deemed necessary. So when we look at the actual meetings, the meetings are held when they are quorate, and quorate would be 50% plus one member. Members are not allowed to vote on a matter where a conflict of interest is identified. The Secretariat tables individual cases followed by deliberation by members prior to a voting process, which takes place on an individual case-by-case basis. When CWC members identify any shortcomings or require further information, we request the Secretariat to follow up on the outstanding information with the Department of Public Entity. We also sometimes, the CWC, invite the accounting officers or accounting authorities or the CFOs to attend a specific meeting to provide clarity as and when required. And then that affords us the opportunity to engage with the department or public entity based on the information on hand and further information required. Meetings are minuted and decisions that are condoned or not condoned, together with reasons, are provided for each decision taken in a response letter that's then signed and shared by the delegated authority to the respective departments and public entity. With regards to the approval of requests when it comes to condoning, the PT delegated official then receives the responses from the condonation working committee and the recommendations from the committee, and they review the recommendation whether to approve or not approve upon the request. The delegated official may request additional information prior to approval in terms of a response letter. If there is removal, if we do not condone, if the CWC does not condone irregular expenditure, the framework and the NTI allows the accounting officer or accounting authority, and it says the accounting officer or authority may remove irregular expenditure not condoned by a PT if the accounting officer or authority is satisfied that the recommendations confirms that the matter is free from fraudulent, corrupt, and or other criminal conduct, that disciplinary action was taken in the case of being against the responsible official, that the department did not suffer any losses, and that non-compliance that led to the irregular expenditure has been addressed to ensure that such expenditure does not reoccur under similar circumstances. Now, I mentioned that NT introduced new requirements or a new NTI in 2022, which became effective 2023 to manage irregular expenditure. So this framework was issued in January, as I mentioned now. The AOs are now, and the accounting authorities have now been assigned the power to condone irregular expenditure when irregular expenditure results from an employee exercising a power or performed a duty that falls outside of their delegation of authority. So that is when the AA or the AO may look at a condonation, has the power to condone. The summary of cases, I thought it would be good to just give a snapshot of the summary of cases we've looked in the period from when it became delegated to the provincial treasuries. So the total applications that we received was 881. The total applications that we've assessed to date is 876. The total applications that's been condoned has been 531. So you'll see we don't just condone everything that comes through. We've sent back applications that have not been condoned. We've sent it back, which was 128. So those 128, we considered that they are not actually irregular expenditure. It could have been due to administrative errors or transactions incorrectly classified as irregular expenditure. So we've referred that back to the department to deal with in terms of the accounting authority and the accounting officer. So applications that we've received at the end of March and is pending condonation is 5. and the applications for condonation that have been referred back is 202. This means we've sent it back because we require additional information. And for example, this could be in terms of disciplinary action or remedial steps to prevent the reoccurrence of irregular expenditure. It's also good to note that the oldest case that was submitted to us, because I think there just wasn't time for this case submitted to national for them to be looked at, dates back to 2013, 2014. And it obviously touches on the current year. So we've looked, the 881 cases relates to 9 years of cases. Our assessment process started since 2020. So we've done 3 financial year cycles, 2020, 21, 21, 22, and 22, 23. In terms of the way forward on the new NTI and framework, we've had a workshop with the internal control units, and we've consulted with them on the 3rd of March on the new requirements that have been introduced by NT. We've also had a session with NT, information session, and this took place in March 2023, and we have communicated our concerns in terms of the new requirements, specifically that the new framework and NTI doesn't have, I think, comprehensive guidance or clarity to distinguish when the relevant when the AO or the accounting authority is the relevant authority to condone irregular expenditure and when it should be PT. And then also the completeness risk identified in terms of the new disclosure requirements in the AFS and the annual report. So PT is in the process of documenting our concerns, the Western Cape government's concerns, in terms of the new requirements, and commentary will be submitted to the National Accountant General for consideration. A Treasury circular will be issued to the AOs and the AAs with the interpretation and the implementation of the new requirements. An updated transversal SOP will also be issued to ensure consistency amongst the departments and entities. The directed provincial accounting provincial government accounting and compliance will introduce quarterly compliance testing to review the irregular expenditure that's now going to be condoned by the accounting officers and the accounting authorities. PT has also further partnered with the National School of Government to update the NSG's irregular expenditure training and the rollout of the training to the Western Cape government departments and entities during this financial year. And that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Adila. Chairperson, that then concludes the 2 presentations from the Provincial Treasury.
Thank you very much, HOD. Honorable members, there you've got the presentations. Are there any questions? Let me try and look on those who have. Yes, honorable members. I see this Honorable America, Honorable Matloti, Honorable Nkondlo, and Honorable Kasim. Let's do it in that order.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentations, Mr. Savage and your team. Chairperson, the matters that were raised was quite a while ago, and part of the first presentation was the expenditure trends for the latest concluded financial year, and one could, from the evidence that was produced, one could call it that the under expenditure would be 0.5%. So it's quite a significant improvement compared to the previous financial year. So my question is basically, I have 2 questions, one relating to the first presentation and another to the second presentation. And there was an other expenditure relating to bursaries that were declined. And I'm curious to know as to what were the possible reasons why bursaries were declined. Is it one because the conditions attached to it may not be acceptable or to the recipients of those bursaries? And secondly, the under expenditure on bursaries were those monies rolled over to the next financial year. And if possibly put it this way, the past financial years, allocation for bursaries, that being the 22nd and 23rd financial year. Was there a greater uptake on the bursaries that were offered to potential students? And in the second question, Chairperson, relating to the second presentation, is the process in dealing with irregular expenditure. Now, I'd like to know how do departments or entities in general comply and adhere to the processes that's been outlined in dealing with irregular expenditure? Are there departments who simply just do not strictly adhere to the laid down procedures? And if so, who are those departments or entities? And then possibly, depending on the response, there might be a follow-up question. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Maseko, thank you very much, Honorable America.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, thanks for the presentation from the department. Just a quick one. I think Member America have covered me with some of the questions. A quick one, it will be for the condoned 531. The explanation is that, or the reason for condonement, let me check, just the applications condoned of 531. There's no the monetary loss attached to it. Now, I want to find out to what extent is the services being affected by that. It might be the money was not lost, but maybe the service was not as anticipated being delivered to the communities. So the condonement part of it, if you look at it, do you look also with the impact for service delivery, or is just for monetary loss, or what is the motivation to the condonement? When is it not acceptable, irrespective of the explanation that we got of the monetary loss? If I can get the clarity on that one, and I'm sorry if I didn't hear because it was a long, and I got out. I went to the office, out of the office a little bit, if there was an explanation. And the other one, it will be now, just for a layman like me, the 881 that it starts from 2013 to 2022, 2023. This 202, it goes back to which year? Is this 202 for 2020, 21, 2021, 22, and 2022, 23? And if that is the case, the chunk of this comes from which departments for the condonement? And the last one, it will be, I don't know how to put this. The last one, it will be, if okay, just let me leave it, Chair. I will wait for the response because now I'm going to ask making with the anticipated interpretation, my interpretation of the response. So I better listen, maybe I'll be covered. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. I've got questions in the first presentation and the second one. So you will guide me, Chair, if I become out of order. But on the first presentation,
we are dealing with both presentation.
Okay.
No problem, Honorable Nkondlo.
Okay, Chair. One thing I just wanted clarity on, which may not necessarily be in the presentation, but I'm trying to understand to the colleagues, when you talk about consultants and panel of experts, what is the differentiator between the two? So that's the first thing I see. In others, there was a delay of appointment. There was also a delay of, the panel of experts could not be secured, or getting some support. Are we referring in those situations, getting external support outside of the department that operates as consultants? Are these the same things? Just by definition, I'm interested to understand that. The second part of my question as part of the causes, the department identifies poor planning and supply chain. Now, what is behind poor planning in Treasury as they have looked at it? So what would be the root cause of this poor planning and also of the supply chain challenges that they've identified? Is it an HR, human resource, where people are not properly skilled, blah, 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 which actually links to my initial question, and whether these would have been identified, as a function of that consultant or external support services. So I'm trying to understand that, Chair, in terms of what drives this, and whether, if it is an HR function, the type of training, as I see, there's even some issue of uptake of bursaries. The type of training that is being done at Treasury at this point, if one were to consider it, does it yield the necessary result in terms of the problems that have been identified? Then moving to the second presentation, Chair, I'm only going to ask two questions for now. That in terms of this condonation, can colleagues share with us the condonation framework, which helps us to understand, as it was explained, how it is defined, what is its nature, so that those that actually get to determine the eligibility of any transaction to be condoned falls within those categories from that particular framework. Is that available, and can it be shared with us? And in as far as the assessment tests that colleagues mentioned, I'm trying to understand if there is a guideline from Treasury that has been given to the departments that seeks to define what triggers such assessment, who is actually responsible, and the final arbiter of i.e. Assessment that would have been done in that particular department. I'm going to stop there for now, Chair, just to get clarity on the second presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable Kasim.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think my first questions on the bursary issue and the reasons has been covered by the first speaker. Secondly, under condemnations, looking at all the cases on the presentation, is there an indication as to which departments or services has the majority of fraud, corrupt or criminal cases? Also, is an indication as to how many officials has been implicated or involved in such cases for the period under review? And then the oldest case dates back 9 years. How was there no time for it to be submitted back to national, as the previous speaker said? If you can just explain or give clarity on that. And then also is an indication as to how much is spent on legal fees annually or during this period under review, whether it is to defend officials or the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. If you can just give clarity on that. I think I'll leave my questions there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Just one general comment or question, a point of clarity from my side. HOD, maybe you will also clarify this yourself or any of your members. I take it as we are dealing with irregular expenditures, that also covers the other form of wrong expenditure, such as unauthorized, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Or is there another rule or another policy that also deals with those as well? If you can, I just wanted to just get a clarity on that, or that are we only dealing with irregular, or does it also include the other forms of wrong expenditures, such as unauthorized, fruitless and wasteful expenditure? Thanks, HOD.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to members of the committee for the questions. I will go to my colleagues to assist with answering them, and if I may just give some answers to some of them, and then just indicate who I'd like to answer some of the other questions. On the question of Member America and a few other members asked on the under expenditure on bursaries, when successful, when people are awarded the bursaries, they may then subsequently, as young people often do at the start of their careers, find more compelling bursary offers, or take a change, decide to take a slightly different course in their career that is outside the scope of the bursaries that we offer. And then I think we've also had some disruptions in the environment due to changes in the NSFAS funding environment. I will ask Nadia Ismail to talk to a little bit of the trends in uptake subsequent to this financial year under review, in other words, for the 22-23 financial year, because obviously, when we award a bursary, we'd very much like that young person to take it up, although it's not always possible for those reasons. We don't roll over that bursary money. We have a fixed pool of bursaries that we offer every year, and that's why we would like to see it taken up. But Ms. Ismail can speak to that a little bit more detail. On Member America's second question on irregular expenditure, do departments adhere to the processes? Well, that's mandatory in terms of the processing in terms of condonation processing. So if that hasn't happened, it is sent back if there is further information that's required, or if we don't feel that there's quite complete enough submissions on the issues. But I think Ms. Abu can speak to that again, as well as to the questions on do we see some departments seeking more condemnations than others? How many, what are their value, and so forth. A lot of that, I should just point out, is still reported in the annual financial statements of the individual entities. So, a lot of the detail those actions are taken up. The detail is taken up there, and obviously we didn't seek to present, the lengthy list. We can provide more aggregated information if the committee can just indicate what it would like in that respect. But yeah, no, look, the condonation, adhering to the condonation process is a mandatory requirement. It's not voluntary, and if we feel, the committee feels that it's partial, as Ms. Wood explained, then it will seek further information from the department or the entity. There is very clear guidance, I think, just to add on this question, from Member Nkondlo, that we have given, and we've on the framework and on the process and requirements. We've given that in PT Circular 27 of 2020, which we'd be happy to share with the committee. But we also have gone beyond that, obviously, and had extensive engagements with our CFOs and departments to provide training and more verbal interactive guidance on the issues. So we've gone out of our way to make sure that it is clear to that, but we can certainly, I think, provide the committee with Circular 27. It is on our website. Circular 27 of 2020. It is on our website. Just noting, of course, that as Ms. Abud indicated, that is being updated with changes in the regulatory environment from National Treasury. The member Maseko, you asked around the monetary losses. Of course, not all. It's very important to note that not all irregular expenditure, in fact, a minority of it actually leads to a monetary loss. That is reported on in the AFS as part of the condonation process. Whether the service was successfully delivered, it may well be that in those cases the service is indeed successfully delivered. And I'll ask just Ms. Abu to speak to those issues in a little bit more detail. And just to clarify for Member Maseko as well, of those 202 cases that were referred back, what we presented on that slide refers to all outstanding condemnations to date. Because there'd been a huge backlog before the Provincial Treasury had been authorized to process condemnations. And so there were a lot that were just sitting, the oldest being 9 years old, sitting at National Treasury until we had the authority to actually begin to process them. They had become stale in that process. National Treasury was simply a little overwhelmed and wasn't getting to all of them. We, of course, once we had the authority, have stepped into that space and cleaned it up significantly. But Ms. Abu can just speak to a little bit more detail, which departments and so forth. And as I say, we can come back with more detail on that if the committee can just clarify exactly what it would like above the transaction level on these matters. Member Nkondlo, you asked around the panel of experts versus consultants. They aren't substantively different. It's just a slightly different approach to procurement. So it'll both result in there being a consultant available to the department for a particular task. When you go for a panel, it's for an ongoing series of sub-tasks, if I can call it that, within a broad frame of reference, and you draw down the consulting services as and when they're required. So it just streamlines the procurement process a little bit, makes it a little bit more agile. So it's suited to certain types of consultancy services that we may want to bring on board and not go completely new afresh to the market every time. It is a little bit more difficult to set up and takes a little bit longer to set up a panel of experts in the initial phase, but then it really streamlines your ability to draw down in later phases and getting the task done.
You also are not having sex because I was not.
Chairperson, can I continue?
Yes, please. I can see it has stopped, or that has
okay.
Stop. Sure.
So it resolved. you know, and as we've advised our standing committee on this, you know, we don't use consultants for, we use them for very, very particular reasons where it doesn't make sense for us to necessarily hold highly specialized skills on particular tasks in the department, because we draw down those skills on an irregular basis. So it's more efficient for us to use consultants and get those specialist skills in as and when we need them, rather than sustain those skills on a sustained sustained basis. Honourable Nkondlo asked the question of what is behind poor planning. Well, we've done, as the CFO had indicated, quite a lengthy root cause analysis, and really there were two areas that came out there. The first was the process of bid specification was something that really needed to be tightened up. In other words, if you're going to enter a procurement, you really need to understand what it is you really, really want. We have a process in the department which double checks or quality assures the bid specification process. And we were finding there was a lot of to and fro in that space, and in the planning for procurements. In our annual procurement plans, our managers were not leaving enough time for that to traverse that quality assurance process successfully. The second area was around reporting systems, in them understanding that you know, the clock keeps ticking here. So we've had to step in to remind them around the need to stick to the timelines in plans and the implications of even a week's delay in their planning processes. So those were the areas that we've really lent in on. We've really tightened up our reporting system, so there's a regular flow of information and sustained pressure, rather than just trying to spike pressure towards the end of a financial year, but sustained pressure, because that's where you get quality and results. And alongside that, we really stepped up our skills development and training for, let me call it, the non-financial or the non-SCM specialist managers, in understanding their roles in the process. So providing guidance on what constitutes good bid specification and so forth. Now, obviously, you know, there's certain parts of the Treasury where we have those skills, very, very high level skills in that respect, but there are other parts, you know, where we need to continually build them, and build them at the right level in the Treasury, because one needs to learn how to operate a supply chain system in a government context early in one's career to really be successful across one's career. So we have stepped in, and we've got some quite a new round of ideas in the skills development and training for our own staff that we're looking at introducing in this financial year. Where we take people through systematic processes of in-career training on both the financial management and the supply chain management, to make sure that people's skills remain sharp in this respect. Has it yielded results? We are cautiously optimistic, as the CFO said, that it has been, you know, our interventions have yielded results for this year. I think for member Kasim, I'll allow Adila Abu to speak a little bit around the departments, how many officials and so forth. We don't have that data available to us now, but as I say, if we can just have clarity from the committee on exactly what data sets we can provide at an aggregated level, it would be helpful. We'd be happy to provide some more information in that respect. The detailed transaction level information is contained in the reporting by the departments. Honourable Kasim, your question of why the 9 years? Well, that was exactly a combination application that had got stuck in the national process, and once we had the authority, we could move into it. I don't think we're in a position to answer the question on how much has been spent on legal fees in defense of irregular expenditures. That would be something that would be in the individual departments. We can see in the system from our financial reporting systems what is spent on legal services, the specific matters on which those legal services were required would be quite broad, though I would suspect this is a relatively small component of that. So let me then just hand over to first Ms. Ismail on the question of bursary uptake trends, and then to Ms. Adila Abu to just talk us through what I might have missed out on the question on information, particularly on condemnations, as well as the criteria and so forth that are used there as well. Thank you. Firstly, Nadia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, HOD. So on the side of Provincial Treasury, we do have 3 platforms in terms of which we award bursaries. So we have our internal bursary program, where we empower and we support our own staff, and 2 external bursary programs, one of which includes a collaboration with the WCED and with Nedbank in the form of the Nedbank essay writing competition. So in 22-23, we awarded 10 bursaries in terms of our external bursary program, of which 7 was taken up. We also awarded 12 bursaries in terms of the Nedbank essay writing competition, of which 8 was taken up. So out of a total of 22 bursaries awarded, 15 was taken up altogether. And like my HOD mentioned, we have constantly need to compete with other institutions whose bursaries are far more attractive than ours and who offer beyond just tuition and textbooks, and also include travel and accommodation, which we do not, unfortunately. Thank you.
Adila.
Thank you, members. I'm going to supplement David's response because I think he's covered a lot of it in a majority amount. So I'm going to try my best. So in terms of the process, I know the first question that came through was to ask how do departments comply, or how did they comply or not comply, and how do we get them to adhere to the processes? So as David said, it is mandatory. So we have the transversal SOP that we issued out in terms of dealing with the irregular expenditure process, as well as the process map and the framework. What we do in the beginning, I would say that because it was new, it was not specific departments, it was just getting the principles right. And once we embedded that down, we still sent everything back. We were consistent in the application. So I can't say that it's one department to answer that question or a specific bunch of departments. And in terms of the question on the services, was services impacted? So in the 531 cases that were condoned, one of the very strict criteria, and the part of why I mentioned the definition, irregular expenditure, if you look at it, is basically non-compliance to legislation, but not necessarily overspending in terms of a service. So what you have to show as part of the criteria and assessment is that value for money was achieved. So when we say value for money, we link it to services. So if this is what was being procured, we have to see that the service delivery was achieved and not impacted in a negative way. So that's one of the considerations. In terms, I think David's already answered the question on of the 202 cases, who is the majority, which period and where is the chunk in the department. That is you would be able to see that in the respective departments' annual financial statements. And just off the cuff, if you would like the information, we can obtain it. I don't have it at hand with me right now, but maybe we can get a consolidated list that the members would like, and I can put the information together. With regards to requesting the sharing of the framework, I can share both the frameworks, the 2019 and the one that is effective 2023, as well as the NTIs that came with it. The question on the official, what I understood from the question is, Which officials are in charge of conducting the determination on the assessment test, and who is that? From within every department and public entity, it depends on the delegations within that department and entity. Most of the departments allocate that responsibility to the internal control unit to do the assessments, but sometimes it can be the financial accounting unit. So that's the short answer to that question. And then David covered the question as to why the one application was since 2013. And the last question to ask that was asked in terms of does this also include unauthorized, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure? No, it does. We are talking specifically to irregular expenditure at this point. So that's my answers. If there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer again.
Thank you both. I think we covered the questions. I hope we did there, Chairperson.
Thanks, HOD. Honorable members, any follow-up questions? Let me check. I see that Honorable Gondlo. Is Honorable Gondlo?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay, a follow-up, Chair. One on the responsible authority or official in the department. I'm sure a treasury, as an example, I would have been interested to get specifically in treasury who is responsible. Who is that official that does that? Then yes, we can go to other departments, because surely there should be some kind of a standardized a process and indication of that function. And one of the reasons, which is my interest in the follow-up, is the chain of command. Because assuming that this particular assessment test, as it's indicated in the presentation, it's encouraged to be done in the tests or checkings that the department treasury has advised other departments, but also post. So my interest of understanding who is responsible and actually the final arbiter is on two levels. One, on ensuring that this particular process, does not get to be used, by those that may not be happy with the outcomes, particularly of these procurement processes, which we have seen, and actually can bring others, so abuse of the process itself, but also accountability, particularly when it is post. Because my little understanding of any supply chain process, it has got chain of command from those that in the different stages of any procurement process, from where you actually scope out the specifications right to the actual approval of the bid. So that is why I'm interested in understanding where this particular function lies. So that also at the same time, that particular accountability is not necessarily conflated, depending who at times becomes a referee and a player at the same time. So I think that was my question, and I'm hoping I would be made more clearer on this question. Then the follow-up, the other one, Chair, which is the new question, is that who establishes the CWC? Is the CWC within the provincial treasury, at a provincial treasury level? And which directorate is it? In the office of the CFO, in the office of the HOD, and where does it account to? So I'm interested to know about that particular structure of the CWC that has been made here in the presentation. And I think Member Kasim covered me, although I didn't get clearly the answer. because part of my question would have been on the number of condonation cases that the department has dealt with. And I'm assuming these are from Provincial Treasury, that is the 700 and something versus the 581 that have been condoned. What is the nature of this kind of and amounts, particularly if they are only for Treasury? And I accept that we can ask about the other departments, but I would have understood that condonation departments would then apply for condonation to the Provincial Treasury, who then is the one that actually finally approves condonation or not. So unless I've misunderstood what the HOD was saying, because the assumption is that these condonation cases are a collective of all of those coming from the various departments, which must then apply to Provincial Treasury for condonation. So I'm interested really to know the nature and the amounts, which, if my assumption is correct, it would mean all of those amounts should be sitting with a Provincial Treasury. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Nkondlo. HOD.
Thank you, Honourable Nkondlo. Yes, just to clarify, on the condonation processes, these are all the applications for condonation received by the Provincial Treasury across the provincial government for all the departments and entities that may apply for condonation to the Provincial Treasury. It's not the Provincial Treasury as a department that has this number of condonation applications. Far from it. And I mean, ours, I think, are very, very small. So the Provincial Treasury assesses these applications and determines whether condonation should be granted. The process, as Ms. Abu had laid out, is through this condonation working committee. That is a committee within the Provincial Treasury that does the technical working out of the assessment. It undertakes the assessment in the process that was laid out and is further laid out in the and that's a formal committee that is established with delegated authority, and it's in our governance and asset management branch, which is led by Ms. Kantana. And so there is a formal committee established with formal terms of reference and so forth, that people appointed to that committee, and they do the formal processing. Once they have processed it, they make a recommendation to the head of Treasury, which is myself, make a final determination based on the recommendations and communicate with the department concerned. So there is a structure that is established by the Provincial Treasury with the clear terms of reference, clear authority, and a process that it follows. But this is to perform a function at a provincial-wide level. It's not for the department. We do, of course, have the information on the number of cases, and we presented that to the committee. We have information on the value of cases and so forth. And we can provide further information on this if the committee can just indicate what specifically it's looking for. Of course, we keep fastidious records on all of this. But I think it's just important to draw the committee's attention back to the definition of irregular expenditure. So if there is a transaction where there was some form of technical irregularity of whatever nature that is identified by the department and they seek condonation on it, okay, and it may be a relatively small matter, that would bring the entire value of that transaction to irregularity. But we can certainly provide the information on that respect. Member Nkondlo, on your first question, actually, which I think was more directed at the department in terms of the responsible officials, the supply chain system, well, the accounting officer is ultimately the responsible official within the ambit of laws and regulations in supply chain, but the authorities are delegated. Now, across departments, they will have different types of frameworks for delegation that are adopted when it comes to the supply chain management system. What is critical and what we certainly follow in the provincial treasury and through our accounting officer system, try to support other departments to follow, is a very clear segregation of duties in the supply chain system, so that there's not one person that's responsible for the whole supply chain. So there's always checks and balance, the whole transaction through the supply chain system. So there's always a check and a balance. There are always two pairs of eyes on what is going on. So that segregation of duties is very fundamental to the way we structure ourselves and the way we delegate authority. What that and that is to make sure that there is no irregular activity that might, or no risk of irregular activity that might emerge. What that means in practical terms for the department is that the procedural aspects of or if I can say the compliance-related aspects of taking a transaction through the supply chain system are managed through our CFO's office, and that is supported by a departmental bid adjudication committee, which also provides commentary on bid specification. We segregate from the bid specification committee to the bid evaluation committee as well. So there's a committee system that has segregation of duties and ensures that there are additional eyes that are brought to bear on all transactions. As you can see, it does make it a relatively complex process to make sure that we've got belt and braces of good governance around what's happening. And my job as the head of the department, as the accounting officer, is to ensure that that process is working as optimally as it can do. So people are stepping up and playing their roles, but that segregation of duties, the delegation system, the committee systems, and so forth are in place and are functioning optimally. There is always a risk in the supply chain, and remember, Onkondlo is quite correct to note that people may seek to, disaffected or unsuccessful bidders in the supply chain may seek to abuse aspects of the process through vexatious appeals or what the case may be, and we deal with that all the time. There is extensive case law and belt and braces to allow fair appeal to occur, and there's judicial precedent on that as well, which we follow. But there will be vexatious or appeal from a disaffected bidder, and that's part of the process of what happens. We do think that our system is robust enough to be able to navigate through that and make sure that there is ultimately a fair, competitive, transparent process of supply chain management in line with Section 217 of the Constitution. So I hope that answers your question on the chain of command, but also the segregation of duties. So I just forgot to mention while the CFO's office in the Provincial Treasury is responsible for the procedural aspects of compliance, the substantive aspects of what we're seeking to purchase through a supply chain is something which must be driven by the content manager, the actual manager who's responsible for the work itself, the substantive work itself. That's fairly logical, and that's another part of that segregation of duties. So Adila, I don't know if you wanted to add anything further on the establishment of the CWC at PT level, its structure, terms of reference, and so forth, as well as the kind of broad outline of the sort of information that we keep on record, that we could provide a summary of to the committee.
David, thank you. Yes, I can share the information to the committee in terms of the cases, the monetary value, and the nature. I just wanted to add, I think one of the questions that came through is who sits on the CWC. It's different functional units, not within the office of the CFO. We have our SCM oversight representative that sits from Provincial Treasury that sits as a member. Our budget office that sits as a member, the accounting unit, the PG accounting unit oversight that sits as a member, as well as our financial governance unit that sits as a member. And the committee is comprised of those individuals from the different units, as well as alternatives should someone not be able to attend, as well as the Provincial Accountant General, who's the chairperson of the committee. Yeah. And I think once I share the framework, quite a lot of the detail in terms of the process that I mentioned today will also be covered in the framework and the NTI.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope you've answered Member Nkondlo's questions.
Thank you very much, HOD. Honorable members, I just want to check one more, if maybe are there any further follow-up questions before we may move to the next item. There's a hand up. Honorable Nkondlo.
Chair, my last question, can I just check, does this system has any interaction with local government? Thanks.
May I, Chairperson?
Yes, HOD.
This system does not interface with local government. They have their own systems and processes. So we do not condone expenditures on municipalities. We're not involved in that through this system.
Thank you very much, HOD. Then in that regard, honorable members, let me make use of the opportunity to thank the department led by the HOD for the as well as results that they've given. Thank you very much, HOD. You may now be excused while we are going to continue with the rest of our meeting. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and members.
A few minutes for you to be excused. Sure. There you are, honorable members. I then want us to move to the next item, which is matters of SAPAC. That's the next item, Mr. Davidson.
Yes, Chair. Chair, can I humbly request from yourself in the committee just to first just to consider the last committee minutes, Chairperson, which I have on hand, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Please.
And yes, and that minutes, Chairperson, will then give context to the SAPAC matter that will follow, Chair.
Thank you. No problem. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Well, can you see this, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. Chair, so on page 1, Chair, it's basically just the normal attendance of the meeting, Chairperson, and then we just have our Chair. So that meeting. So our last meeting was the 7th of February, Chair, 2023, and that was when the committee considered its annual resolutions report, for the 2021-22 financial year, and that report has been considered and adopted by the committee chair, which I sent on to all of the departments chairperson for their noting. And then chairperson, all of the annual report minutes have been adopted, tabled, considered and adopted by the committee as well, chair. Then on page 2, Chair, there was just some documents of the committee, the quarterly, the second and the third quarterly report, which were also considered and adopted, Chairperson, by the committee. But Chairperson, where it comes to the SAPAC matter, Chair, you've raised the SAPAC matter, Chair, with the committee. And as I've indicated, that basically that some of the members felt, Chairperson, and queried whether if SAPAC should send, because they send every year an annual membership invoice for 138,000 Rand, Chairperson, which we received last week, Chair. And on the 7th of February, there was actually queries in the meeting. Does SAPAC offer WCBP scope value for money, seeing that there's still that there are still audited financial statements that's outstanding from SAPAC chairperson, which was discussed in the meeting in the AGM meeting last year, August, in Durban, chairperson. And there were just some resolutions that the committee resolved that it will consider whether it will process and pay the SAPAC annual subscription fee once received. We received that last week, Chair. And then the committee also requests that SAPAC submits its minutes of the EXCO meeting that was held in December. I have requested twice for that meeting minutes to be sent, Chairperson. I haven't received anything yet, but I will continue sending SAPAC, the SAPAC Secretariat, those requests, Chairperson, for that meeting, Chair. So that's basically for this, for that meeting, Chair, for the last PAC meeting, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. There are the minutes, honorable members. Any seconders, proposal for the adoption of the minutes?
I move that we adopt.
I second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to record this in my book, Chair. Yes, Chair. Thank you. Chair, then basically, if I can just stop sharing, Chair, that one, and if I can just say, Chair, as you indicated now, Chair, we are now by the stage of Chairperson, of basically, as you indicated, Chairperson, SAPAC has sent us last Wednesday. I just want to get this document, Chairperson. Sorry. Chair, I'm seeing that there's a hand from member Maseko, Chair. While I'm looking for this invoice.
I think that was the previous hand, Honorable Maseko.
No, is they talking about the SAPAC, Chair?
The
SAPAC, the issue of the membership.
You wanted to raise you want to raise an issue now? Okay, no problem. Please go ahead.
Because already we received that communication, or that Dustin is looking for. I think he sent it on our group of the the public accounts on the WhatsApp group. And I saw it the membership fee that needs for the renewal to pay for this financial year. And like in the last meeting, I'm still saying that we haven't received any audited financials since 2019, since we elected the SAPAC leadership. Now, that's number one. Number two, it needs to be noted that as we speak now, we should have elected the new SAPAC executive. And because we don't have the financials, we don't know if the leadership that is there from the provinces they come from, who has paid, who hasn't paid, because you are eligible to be elected if your province have paid. We don't have all the information. So constitutionally, it's just a lot of things that doesn't make sense. And I'm still saying that we cannot put in the money where we don't see how is that money being used and what is it being used for. I mean, from 2019, it's seriously, we have been patient enough to think that things will be better. We got the narrated financials and we said, okay, put it in the financials so that we can see. Still now, nothing has come up, and we get the communication of pay the membership, but we don't get the financials. Doesn't make sense. So my proposal is we are going to communicate to the speaker that the memberships must be held until we receive the financials from SEPEC. That will be what will qualify the membership to SEPEC from Western Cape. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, any other comment? Honorable America?
Chairperson, I support that position. Thank you.
Honorable members, thank you very much for that. I also just want to mention that, of course, we as the Western Cape were always reported as the one province. We're actually among the provinces that are always very much up to date in terms of the payment of their subscription fee. And I think that then maybe if there is a concern that we are having, that we only want to pay when the financial audited statement have been presented to us. I don't have a problem with that. But also we must bear in mind that it will also affect our participation in the affairs of SAPEC, because also that might also mean that because the financial statement can only be presented at an annual general meeting. They cannot just be sent to us as a committee. And only when they have been presented at an annual general meeting of SAPEC and it be approved, then it can be sent to us. And therefore, that means that in the meantime, we might not be able to participate in the affairs of SAPEC. I just wanted to raise that. But other than that, I really don't have any problem with that proposal. Are there any other members?
Chair, I have raised my hand. It's quite interesting if that will be the case, because we have gone through the meetings where we saw some of the provinces. It will be about 2 years that we haven't received their membership. So if Western Cape will be the first year that they haven't paid and already they start to exclude them, it is going to be interesting. But another thing is that I'm proposing, we have as the Public Accounts Committee in Western Cape, if we can find out, Dustin can find out for us in the scenarios like this, what empowers us to try to engage with the leadership of SEPEC to force them to give us that report. Do we have something that empowering us to can call them to address us, to tell us what is the challenge, why we can't get the financials of the money that we've been paying to them? Or we don't have, can we call the AG to tell us how can we go about to deal with that issue? Because it's a worrying issue if you calculate since 2019, and it's not since 2019, to tell the honest truth. It's the last time it was still the same problem that was happening in APEC. So we need to say, how do we also help to deal with the problem that is ongoing in the SAPEC if we are really members in this organization? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko. That's noted. Then, honorable members, are there any other issues? If there are no other issues on this matter, can we then
My hand is up, Chair.
Oh, I could not see it, Honorable Ngondo.
No, thank you, Chair. I think in light of the discussion, there's a proposal that was placed by Member Maseko, supported by Member America. And you made your, I think, your point in explaining the implications of the decision. I would think, Chair, at this point, based on the conversation or discussion that we have held and the proposal being made, perhaps one of the things we could do, one is to serve that notice to SEPEC, I think, about our intention to withdraw given these particular reasons, including what we understand as an implication with the argument Member Maseko is making. Because indeed, if there is a particular contractual obligation of parties, it is within the ambit that whatever service or whatever membership that you are signing on, there is due obligations to it. And I think what Member Maseko is raising has to do with that particular principle, that if there is payment that is being made, which is beyond just payment, but allows this parliament participation, to the services and all others, as you had indicated, participating in conferences and all other matters within SAPEC. So it then goes to say, Chair, SAPEC on their side must also meet their obligations. And the argument that the WCPP is making, which it has been making, is that end of the stick, SAPEC is not meeting its end of the stick. So surely in itself making a determination on a decision by WCPP, which it gives as notice to withdraw its membership, with understanding that from its side, that is WCPP, it has fulfilled all of its obligations. So it cannot be that then SAPEC would want then, to activate one aspect that deprives WCPP participation, especially as Member Maseko, because I don't have that, I've not necessarily attended many of the meetings of SAPEC, but as she says, that there is evidence that in SAPEC, there are members who have not even been fulfilling that obligation on their side, and they have been allowed. So I'm making the point, Chair, and the argument that perhaps we must put notice to SAPEC that as the Western Cape chapter, we have observed this, we have raised this matter, which we believe, is outside statutes and obligations of this particular institution and within its governance principles. And therefore, we are serving this notice with a full understanding and expectation that we shall continue to participate in the affairs of SAPEC, because what we are raising as a withdrawal is in regard to this particular aspect, which is, the fact that financial statements are not being provided for. So I thought, let me make that suggestion in this instance, so that we actually indeed balance the obligations, because our intent with this particular action is really not punitive in my view, but is to actually press upon the point of compliance, but also of good governance and practice by the institution, that through paying our subscription fees, we seek to form part of.
Thank you, Honorable Ngondo. I think that's very constructive. I think we are definitely going to be in communication with SAPEC and also indicate to them that our intention to withhold the subscription because of certain reservations that we are actually having around it. I think that's a very constructive view. I don't have a problem with that. Do you agree with that, honorable members?
Agree, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, then the next item, then if we finish with matters of SAPEC, Mr. Davids, it will be the resolutions.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. So I've captured some resolutions, Chair, especially with SAPAC, that we're going to engage, that the committee wants to engage SAPAC on this issue and the challenges of submitting their annual financial statement, Chair. So that will be in a letter to them, Chairperson, just basically serving notice on the decision of the committee, including the desire of the committee to still participate in its activities up until the point where they produce the audited financial statements, Chair, to the committee, by then the committee will then process payment for the 138,000 annual affiliation fee, Chair. And then, Chairperson, it was basically just for the condonation framework. The department said that they will be able to submit their 2019 plus 2023 condonation frameworks, Chair, including all the National Treasury instructions that's associated with the condonation framework for departments within the province, Chair.
Any other further proposal from members? If there are any.
Chairperson,
Honorable Maseko.
through you, can I ask that through you we commission a research document from the research department, Dustin, to find out all about the scenarios like this, like the memberships, if we are in a scenario where we are, what is it that empowers the legislatures to act against this not happening ever again? Can we ask them to do that research on your behalf and just give it to us to check the options that we do have?
Okay, I will do
Because
that.
it's not like Western Cape, we want to be out of the association, but there needs to be, like Member Ngondo put it nicely, so there need to be responsibility from their side as also we are responsible.
I will do so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any further resolution, honorable members? If there is nothing, then honorable members, I think in the light of that, that means that we have come to the end of our meeting. Let me thank you very much for your active participation in the meeting and as well as your constructive engagement and discussion on it. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, honorable members.